and welcome back to another episode of Meat Speak, powered by the certified Angus beef brand, Brian Schaff, Chef Tony Biggs, and with us, very popular meat scientist. You know, the popularity scale of meat scientists is one that doesn't really get discussed enough, but number one on our list, Diana Clark. How you doing?
Doing pretty good.
Chef, how you feeling?
I'm good. How are you both doing? You guys doing good?
Doing good.
What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about like a complex situation.
You know, I think we just need to go there. Where are we going? You know, in the world of culinary, I look at you as sort of the ringmaster of all things. Yeah.
What does that tell you?
It's a circus.
Cirque de Sirloin.
Cirque.
Can you say Cirque de Sirloin? Huh?
I like that.
I mean, Matt, have you been to Cirque du Soleil? Both of you, have you seen this?
I've never been.
So what if we did it? What if we did an event called Cirque de Sirloin? I mean, would you like to talk about the
I would
sirloin
love
today?
it.
I mean, really? I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everything's sirloin.
The sirloin doesn't get enough love.
It doesn't give enough love. Why don't you talk about it from a science standpoint here? I mean, people listen to what you say, and it is the gospel.
Oh gosh, I don't think it's nowhere close to God's word, but
I didn't say that. I said it's the gospel.
but I do the sirloin. I mean, really, I don't understand why it's not on more menus.
Yeah.
People just
I
they
know.
don't think it's a middle meat, but it is a middle meat,
I know.
and it's gorgeous. And you just got to treat it right. And if
Really?
you treat it right, man, that thing can shine.
Do you remember when we would do, like, we would have a really high-end culinary group at the center, and then we would do all these baseball cuts, and, you know, that is such a neat idea for restaurants and hotels and chefs, because you can do a baseball sirloin, a baseball fillet, a rib fillet, and a strip fillet. You put those with your favorite bourbon. What is your favorite bourbon, Brian?
Free.
Free bourbon. Yeah, that's exactly what I like. But hey, these are the creative ideas that you can do with these type of cuts.
Oh yeah,
Right?
And the sirloin is cost savings. I mean, galore.
The cost saving is amazing. I mean, you know, we do what the center that you've done before is the Sirloin Chateau. You know, so you know the Chateau is originated from the center cut of the filet mignon, and now we're doing Sirloin Chateau at our center and for carving stations, and it's amazing.
Yeah. So, Diana, let's talk a little bit about that, right? The sirloin is this piece. It performs really well. If you really tear into the meat science and you look at sort of that public perception of the sirloin, I think people just it's a big yawn, really, right? Because you know, I mean, it's seen as sort of your bargain basement. It's gonna be okay. It's your $9.99 with a baked potato special, but really, man, if you tear into the science behind it, it's really been more of a problem of how it's always been cut, how it's been presented, and probably a marketing issue.
It's definitely, I mean, if you think about it just from the cut standpoint, so for the longest time we were taking this big chunk when you still have that, even that cap on there too, and doing, they call it face cut sirloins or the classic 7-bone steak. Okay, so you're going to have, or no, that's the classic pin bone steak. I'm sorry, 7 bones from the chuck. But that classic pin bone steak, you're going to have those giant face cut, but you have these muscle fibers that are running in all different directions. And you have the big sciatic nerve that's running down kind of the center of it. He splits it between the 1/3 and the 2/3. So for the longest time, we were taking that cut and just cutting these nice old steaks that fit pretty much your entire dinner plate. But now you're going with the grain, and people are trying to cut it, getting good eating experience of it, but really they're just chewing the gristle because they didn't cut it appropriately. And now we've realized if we do just a little bit more knife work, if we break that sirloin down a bit more, you peel off the cap, you save that culotte. That's a special piece that can be saved. And you focus on that heart, that center cut sirloin. You split that and remove that sciatic nerve. And man, you've just upped your game by 1,000. It's an incredible piece that a lot of even retailers, they're jumping on the bandwagon because they realize that it's the right portion size. It looks beautiful. Man, that's setting up on the plate. It looks beautiful.
Gorgeous.
And if you still want maybe a bigger sirloin piece, you can cut that out of the 2/3 portions and then have that nice fillet-looking sirloin out of the 1/3 portion.
Excellent. You know, Chef, you'd mentioned it already, Sirloin Chateau, right? Of course, it's a sirloin version of the Chateaubriand.
Chateaubriand.
Yeah, but I mean, can you talk about that from a from a chef perspective, obviously it's coming from the sirloin. It's not coming from the tenderloin, so it's going to be less tender. But there are some other things that you gain, right?
Well, like Diana hit on, economically, you're doing very well. I mean, and chefs are always looking for that new idea for carving stations. So, why are you using the middle meats when you can go to a beautiful sirloin chateau? As Diana mentioned, you could take that sciatic nerve out, and you've got some great cuts of beef. You cook those medium to medium rare, and you serve that with a béarnaise sauce. And I love lobster because I'm from New England, and boy, I'll tell you, you've got an economically beautiful plate. And I tell you, for chefs, you can take these for weddings, sear them off, roast them to medium, take them out at 125, and they are just absolutely mouthwater gorgeous.
They are incredible.
Lovely. If you want to see a diagram of sort of what we're talking about, if you visit certifiedangusbeef.com/news, there are a couple stories all about the sirloin up there with some diagrams that actually Diana had some input in terms of exactly where it pulls apart, where to cut it, where to do this thing. But when we talk about that, we've talked about the center cut portion pretty much exclusively. There's two other cuts. We're going to talk about the culotte or the picanha in actually another episode coming up. But the mouse muscle is the other piece of that. And I bring that up because I know it sits near and dear to your heart, yeah?
Yeah, it does. It's one of my favorites. So, we have a sales rack for those of you that aren't employed at Certified Angus Beef. And on that sales rack, I usually put this cut, and it's called the mouse, okay? But because it really doesn't have a great name, there's a story behind that, but we could talk about that at another date. But it's called the mouse, and so I usually label it mouse and put it on the sales rack for $1, knowing that very few people are actually going to buy said mouse. So, once it's there for a couple of weeks, it goes on sale, and I usually store them in my freezer for 25 cents a piece, and they are my favorite by far. And we actually have one group that we work with that cuts a lot of top sirloin center cuts for a chain restaurant. And so they've ended up with a ton of these mouse muscles. And what they've done, they've partnered with another restaurant, and they put that mouse muscle as a 6-ounce portion on their plate for $26 a piece.
Wow.
And they call it steak frites, and it is amazing.
Wow.
I just want to see that used more and more. The hard part is you can't just order the mouse. It would be a byproduct of cutting top sirloins. But if you work with the cut shop, I'm sure that you could try to figure something out if the volume is there. But it has some great potentials, or at least a limited time offer on a menu.
We've talked a little bit about there's a pretty huge learning curve to a chef or somebody without a meat cutting background to breaking down a chuck roll. But if you bring in a whole top sirloin, a whole top butt, that's not the hardest thing to do to break down yourself, right?
No, definitely not. We have videos on it as well. It's going to take a few times, but really once you do it 2 or 3 times, you could get it. So that was probably one of the first cuts that I kind of had to figure out here on my own. So one day I came in on a Saturday, and I broke down 4 top sirloins, and after that I felt pretty good about it. So 4 in, you should get it.
There you go. That's only 2 cows.
Yeah.
That mouse reminds me of the oyster on a large bird.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Like a turkey, or when you turn the turkey over and you have those 2 beautiful pieces of meat that are like indented into the bone, and they are just melt in your mouth. This is what the mouse reminds me of.
That's a really good point.
What do you do? What do you do with the mouse? Right? Obviously, you see quite a few of them, but I want to make so every one of these episodes is transcribed. So this one's probably going to make the search engines go crazy. How do you cook a mouse?
Pair it with cheese.
You got to trap it first, right?
Peanut butter or cheese?
I am a common person of grilling, salt, pepper, grill. That's all.
Salt,
I do.
pepper, grill.
And it's tender enough, huh?
Oh yeah. It
beautiful.
Really is. It's a great piece. A lot of fine muscle fibers running through there. It really is incredible.
That's interesting. About turning the page to a subject that we've discussed at length, but surprisingly we didn't touch on this yet. Dry aging. Have you dry aged a sirloin?
Oh yeah.
We have,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. It really amazing. It's amazing.
And that's one thing to even hit on from an aging standpoint alone for sirloin. Want to make sure that you go to a minimum of 28 days.
Now, why? Why is that?
It helps with the overall tenderness. We've noticed that sirloin can be a little bit of an outlier, and it takes some time to break it down a little bit further. So we recommend 28 days. We've actually seen here in house, we ordered in product, and it was at 21 days. We cut it and served it, and the chefs were not happy with it. They said it was tough. Well, a week later, we needed more sirloin. I didn't tell them, but I actually cut the sirloin out of the same box that came from before. And this sirloin all of a sudden was incredible.
Always tricking us. Always tricking us.
Never
Watcher.
I'm just that I am very first in, first out, waste not, want not kind of person. So
Right. Can you trust a meat scientist? Can you
Yes.
really trust a
Wow.
meat scientist?
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because it's and again, not to railroad the conversation back into aging and dry aging, but everything kind of has we talk about different cuts have different degrees of doneness that are right for that cut. Different cuts also have different aging ages that are right for them, wet or dry, right?
I completely agree. Yeah.
21 days for most, 28 for the sirloin. What are some of the other outliers?
So your chuck flap, you usually want to take that a little bit further to the 28 days, even your clod hard at times too. Then your tenderloin and your flat iron, you don't need much age on those. 14 days is usually what we'll say with those. And some of your longer cuts, man, we've taken eye around 6 months before wet age. It's pretty fantastic.
Eye around
actually.
6 months at wet age. It's practically Brizola, right?
It's amazing what we've done with the eye round. I mean, that's another conversation, but it's just amazing.
From this is a selfish question. So, one of the strangest questions that I ever heard, actually, Chef Justin Brunson from Denver, from Old Major in Denver, from Red Bear American Meats, great guy. He was in our meat lab and he asked Dr. Phil Bass, our former meat scientist, where does the pinbone steak come from? You've touched on it already, and correct me if I'm wrong. The pinbone steak is, when you think about growing up watching cartoons, and it was that classic steak that cartoonists would draw, right? I mean, it's got the bone right in the middle of it. It's got all the different cuts around it.
Yep.
Yeah. Why don't we see that anymore?
So we've realized, one, that product ships a lot better with bone not in it. So we try to remove the bone from the product. And two, we get way more value out of the animal by breaking it down, especially removing that culotte, removing the mouse muscle, because then you're going to get the product that you want that's easier for that end consumer to handle, easier even for the chef to handle. They don't have to deal with all the trim and waste and everything. They get just what they want and need to cook.
Excellent. And to be clear, we are specifically talking about the top sirloin, right? The bottom
Correct.
sirloin is a whole other piece of meat, right?
Correct. Call it the pieces of meat.
Pieces of meat. Including, though, your tri-tip,
Yes.
right? Your sirloin flap.
And
And what am I forgetting?
The ball tip.
Yes.
Ball tip, yes.
One of my favorites.
2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? How about from just a restaurant usage standpoint? You're talking you bring in a top, but that's pretty much mostly usable stuff, right? You're going to have a little bit of trim, a little bit of fat trim bringing things down, but really it's a pretty usable piece, right?
Yeah, if you're bringing it in, you will have. To me, that is one of your. I guess it's probably a 70% yield on it. You're gonna have some fat loss on there, especially when you start to trim things down. If you can order which you can, a center cut top sirloin, it's going to cost a little bit more money, but then your yield is going to be much, much higher, much more valuable. Actually, you see a lot of retailers now are going to, they call them a two-piece top sirloin, where they're buying both of them, but they're already separated. That mouse muscle's already removed at the packing plant, so you get just usable product. So there are options out there, too, to make it more advantageous to bring in.
Excellent. And, while we're on the subject, you just kind of danced around it a little bit, the idea of cost effectiveness. It's going to cost you a little more to bring it in already cut. We're not ones to necessarily talk about pricing on anything, but by and large, when you look at the influx of prime, USDA prime, certified Angus beef prime, it's out there. There's a lot of it. The sirloin is probably the best bargain for your buck if you get that in prime, correct?
And it's fantastic. We always say that the sirloin's kind of the gateway drug into prime. Once you start there, I mean, you're like, wow, if this can be good, everything can be good. So it just kind of gets you hooked on it, and it is great. Prime, aged 28 days. Man, that's actually was Christmas last year. That's what we served. Everyone was pleased.
Man, that's a lot of pressure.
That was a step up we went from Claude Heart to top sirloin.
Wow.
I mean, yeah.
Did you prepare it?
I did.
Yeah, really?
I was a little nervous.
How'd you prepare it?
I actually sous vide it.
Wow.
I know, right? Gosh, I've been hanging in the culinary world too long.
It's like you're a meat side, right? Everybody else is doing these grand standing rib roasts, and you're like, we'll do a Claude Heart.
Yeah, it worked out.
Oh,
I'm just cheap. Is really the.
No, you're economical.
Economical. That's right.
Well, I'll tell you what. We are actually going to, because we have so much affection for the one part of the top sirloin that we have barely even scratched the surface. We're going to dedicate an entire episode all around the culotte, also known as a picanha, right? The classic cut of the Brazilian steakhouse. So we're going to put a bow on this episode. If you do have any questions, if you want to pick Diana's brain or Chef Tony's brain about ways to use that center cut sirloin, because you're going to be able to get it at a better price generally than most of your middle meats. And there's a lot of things that you can do that maybe you just never went down that road, because when you hear the term sirloin, it doesn't sound all that exciting. We implore you to give it another try. And stick around. This has been Meat Speak, powered by the certified Angus beef brand. I'm Brian Schaff, Chef Tony Biggs, Diana Clark, meat scientist, and we will be back. I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't follow this podcasting thing on when they post, but if this is your first time tuning in, know that you can find us at certifiedangusbeef.com/podcast. Catch us on Google Play, Apple, Spotify. I don't know. You name anywhere that you can find podcasts. So, Chef Diana Clark.
Take care.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Bye.